Here we are, feeling experience. That's what's always happening, right? Feeling whatever's being felt, whatever seems to be showing up, whatever seems to be being experienced, being felt, all of it. We're feeling the fullness of this is what's being experienced. It's always the fullness of reality, the fullness of life, the fullness of existence. This fullness that is being everything, this fullness that is appearing as everything, that is being felt and experienced as everything. The fullness of this vast, infinite sea of life, appearing as every wave of thought, every wave of feeling, every wave of sensation, every wave of memory, every wave of wondering, every wave of joy or worry, or all the ways the waves get described, the way the waves seem to be shaped and formed, and all of it is the fullness. The fullness never is diminished. It never becomes more, it never becomes less. It's always the fullness. It just looks like all of this diversity, all of this unbelievable, like from moment to moment, the nuances, the subtleties, the different ways and that the fullness can be encountered, the myriad ways the fullness can express itself, the ways it can present itself. But it's always the fullness, right? It's always the fullness of life. And from that vantage, there's nothing to change about experience whatsoever. Because all of experience is it. All of experience is the fullness of reality. So the effort to try to modify experience in some way, to shape it so that it somehow conforms to some idea we might have about how it should be, is unnecessary in terms of experiencing the fullness of reality, because we're always experiencing the fullness of reality as each instant of this. We can't actually draw closer to it or somehow be removed from the fullness, because the fullness is showing up as everything. Feel the fullness that you are feeling. Just appreciate that everything is it. That you cannot be, there is no being removed from this. You are the fullness. It's not even, we can't even speak about you or me in relationship to the fullness. The expression of this life, the body minds we often imagine ourselves to be, are an expression of the fullness, right? Of this life. Just sitting as you are is the expression of the fullness. Thinking whatever you're thinking is an expression of the fullness. If there's very little thought present, that's an expression of the fullness. If there's relative calm and ease, that's an expression of the fullness. If it feels, as you might describe, as somehow turmoil or agitation, that is the fullness. Everything is equal in its being, the fullness. You see how there's not something to accomplish. The fullness is accomplished. It's already here, isn't it? Before we take one step to notice the fullness, the fullness is here, isn't it? It beats us to the punch. The fullness is here. Before we logged onto the Zoom call, there was the fullness. Logging onto the Zoom call, there was a fullness. Sitting here as we are together, the fullness. And when we log off of the call, the fullness will be just as full as it always is, just as present as it always is, because there's nothing else that's present but the fullness. It's not caused by anything. It is the cause of everything and the effect of everything. The fullness is the cause and the effect, we could say. So there's not something to do to cause the fullness to become more apparent, because here is the fullness. My words are not causing the fullness to become more apparent. The fullness is apparent as this moment, right? This incredible aliveness, this bright miracle. It's always the case, isn't it? When is the fullness absent? There is no absence. There is no diminishment of the fullness, of its brilliance, of its radiance. Nothing can turn down that light, that force, that Shakti of it. I mean, there's no explanation for that. Even what that is can't be said. A fullness is just a word, but this fullness is beyond all words, beyond all concepts, beyond all ways we might try to understand it, make sense of it, put it into some kind of frame of reference. It's just absolutely impossible. It's too full for that. It's too infinite and vast and ungraspable. And it looks like our life. It looks like our normalcy. It looks like getting up in the morning. It looks like doing our day and meeting whoever we meet as part of our day. And the flow of our life and the kind of seeming timeline of this fullness of experiencing that we call our life is all happening right now. This is the only time the happening ever happens, is right now. Absolutely nothing called the past that can be found, or the future. And what we call now is absolutely impossible to grasp hold of. Impossible to grasp hold of, and yet so here, so palpably present, so concretely present. How paradoxical could it be? You can't pin it down, you can't grab hold of it because it's slipping away, and yet it's here with this constancy, this this relentless presence of it. of the fullness. Again, because the fullness is everything. There's no, from the perspective of realizing, if you will, the fullness, no particular state is required, and nothing needs to be avoided either, because everything is it. And feel the freedom of that every experience is the perfection of this, the absolute fullness of this. At the level of the descriptions, it may not seem so wonderful. I get that. But the basis of all the descriptions is this inconceivable, indescribable miracle that we call life. I remember when at the moment of my mother's passing, I've told this story before, but just in the very instant of the end of her life, which we would call, was like the finality of that was very apparent, like that's it. And that moment of the passing of the form was pure radiance, was pure aliveness. It was pure presence. And I remember just being so struck by that and feeling the way in which death is the same as life in that moment. They're both this. Birth is this and death is this. In that sense, they're the same thing. They're the same mystery, the same miracle, the same fullness. So nothing is ever lost. So it's like when the wave dies, the fullness is not lost. The fullness of the sea is not lost, is it? And the wave is none other than the sea. So the fullness is never lost. There's no loss. This is constantly being lost. Reality is constantly being lost. The instant is constantly dying, right? Just gone. But at the same time, the fullness remains, this indescribable fullness. It's untouchable, indestructible. Feel yourself as that fullness, that the inseparability. You cannot find any separation between anything, including the presumed separation between you and the fullness. Really let that sink in. You are the fullness. Now, not some future time, right now. You're already dissolved in the fullness as the fullness. Everything is dissolved in the fullness. Even as it's appearing, it's still simultaneously dissolved as the fullness.